Well, hello everyone. It's December 7th, 2024, and it's kind of a somber day for me for a couple of reasons, but the main one is because it's the anniversary of an earthquake that hit northwestern Armenia on December 7th, 1988. At the time, it was still part of the Soviet Union, and I was a junior in high school. And on that day, it was already a notorious day for me because that was also the day that one of our high school heroes died. He'd had aplastic anemia. He'd been a popular football player. He did not consort with the likes of me. I was not among the popular crowd. I knew who he was, but we were not really friends. I really had no opinion of him other than hearing about what a great guy he was and how he had worked really hard against all odds to make the football team. And they eventually built a new weight room in his honor, I believe. But I do remember December 7th, 1988. That was the day he died. And I remember you could have heard a pin drop in our high school. And then a few years later, when I was 22 years old, I moved to the Republic of Armenia. And it was a newly liberated former Soviet country. And I was in the third group of Peace Corps volunteers to serve there. I never thought I would go to Armenia. I never thought I would see the former Soviet Union. I grew up in the Cold War era. And in those days, we watched movies like Red Dawn and figured that the Soviet Union was always going to be off limits to us and the Russians were always going to be our enemies. I guess they are still our enemies, although I met Russians when I lived in Armenia and most of them were pretty okay people. It was just the government that was a problem, but don't want to digress on that. But I do want to talk about the earthquake in Armenia and how when I moved there in 1995, at the age of 22, it was still a big deal. Because of the dissolution of the former Soviet Union and the fighting that was going on with Azerbaijan and Turkey, which are neighboring countries. They had no energy most of the time. When I moved there, a lot of times it was dark. You had no power. Some people had no running water. We had no hot water. I used to heat up bath water in a bucket on what they called a fujika. It was a Japanese space heater that we fueled with kerosene. I would get a metal bucket and fill that with water and heat it up on a fujika. Or on my propane stove, which was provided by the Peace Corps. And then I would get in the bathtub with a smaller, I guess like a big cup. And I would pour the hot water over my body and wash myself that way. That's how I bathed for 2 years in the 90s. And I read books by kerosene lamp for the first year. The second year we did get power because Armenia rehooked its power supply to Metsamor, which is a nuclear power plant that was closed after Chernobyl. Or actually, not soon after Chernobyl, that disaster. They shut it down because, or after the earthquake. Sorry, I'm getting my stories mixed up. After the earthquake, because of Chernobyl, they shut down Metsamor. And there was no power. So, it's not like that now. I went to Armenia last year for our anniversary. It would have been 26 years since I finished my service there. One of my students is now working for the Peace Corps. He is a director. And when I left there, I had felt like I hadn't done anything. And I was a bit depressed and angry. And I went through some tough times. But then I went back last year and realized that I did make a difference. And I even ran into one of my students who happened to see me at a concert we attended. She recognized me after 26 years. She didn't want to approach me because she didn't know if it was me. But then later she saw Stepan, my star pupil, and he said, "You need to come in here." And he says, "Oh, is that Jenny?" She recognized me after 26 years. And it meant so much. I joined the Peace Corps for reasons that were kind of selfish, to be honest. I had a sister who'd been in the Peace Corps. She went to Morocco in the 80s. And when I joined, it was not long after I finished college. I finished college in 1994. And I was having a hard time finding work. So I needed to get out of my parents' house. So I decided to apply. I didn't think they would accept me, but they did. Actually, quite quickly. I remember my sister, it took a lot longer for her to get accepted, but for me it was about 2 months. And I went to Armenia, and I was in the 3rd group, and at that time it was still pretty primitive, very few Americans there. And most people who saw me thought I was Russian. I learned the language to an extent. I certainly never became fluent, but I did have friends who spoke it very well, spoke the language. And I lived in the dark for 2 years because there was no power. And when it was over, I was ready to leave. I went to Europe for a month and hung around by train. I couldn't wait to get back to the States. And then when I got back to the States, I wanted to leave, which I have done. So why am I talking about this today? Besides the fact that it is December 7th, and 36 years ago, 25,000 people died, and about 500,000 people lost their homes, and about 150,000 people became disabled. And there were a lot of orphans. Well, it's because I got another hate comment. It was on that video that now has about 8,500 hits on it. MAGA comments are confusing to me. This person wrote, "You must be a dim girl if you think people are looking for you." Well, that's a very short comment, and there's a lot to analyze about it. I'll start with the fact that I stopped being a girl in 1990. That was the year I turned 18. But thank you for calling me a girl. That's a flattering compliment, I guess. Unless maybe you're just trying to say I'm childish or whatever, but I'm 52 years old now. So when you call me a girl, it's kind of insulting, but it's also kind of flattering. So I'll take it as a compliment. Thank you. Secondly, I'm not dim. I'm certainly not a dim person. There's a lot you could say about me, but dim is not something that would be accurate. If you knew me, you wouldn't call me that. No one who does would ever call me that. But if you think that about me, feel free to continue to think that way, because if it means you'll stay away from my channel, then great. I don't want you here. Thirdly, I never said people were looking for me. What I said is, why are you looking at this kind of content? Because if you don't like content that makes fun of Donald Trump, but you're seeking it out, that seems like a very stupid thing to be doing. If it upsets you, it offends you, or bores you, or you think the person that is making it is dim, then why not just go somewhere else? That to me would be the smart thing to do. And you would be doing me a favor, because I don't make content for people that don't like what I do. And really, the truth is, I make it for myself. But I leave it up for people who like it, and there are people who like it. And if you were going to make a comment about no one looking for me, why put it on a video that for me is actually quite successful? That doesn't make any sense either. I don't believe that I'm the dim person in this scenario. But finally, the point I want to make, and it's a point that I'm making for myself because I struggle with my own self-worth a lot of the time for various reasons, mainly owing to depression, which runs in my family. And that is, I have made a difference to people. And I have done things in my life that meant something to other people. Going to Armenia to live for 2 years at a time that was very difficult, that is a sign of strength and resilience, and it changed my life. I'm grateful that I did it. I didn't do it for the most altruistic of reasons, but I did it and I survived, and it did make a difference to me and to other people. And it also changed my entire worldview, because when I went to Armenia, I was a Republican voter. And I remained one for a while after I came home. And now I don't vote for people like Donald Trump, because I know that America is not the center of the universe. And there are other ways to live, and people do live in some ways better, even in places like Armenia, because there people matter more. I will always be grateful to the government of the United States for letting me go to Armenia. And I'll always be grateful to the people of Armenia for welcoming me and teaching me new things and broadening my world and changing my outlook, changing my attitude in some ways. But I know that because I did this, I'm not a dim person. And when I lived there, people knew who I was because I was the blonde American girl who sang. Sometimes we would go to jazz club and go sing with the wonderful jazz players in Armenia. There's a place called the Cascade Steps in Armenia where during our training, at that time it was really underdeveloped, and we would sit there on Friday nights and busk, basically. It was a lot of fun. Couldn't do that today. Armenia's gotten too nice now. One other thing that I have learned from that experience, though, especially after going back last year, is that tough times don't last, but tough people do. And Armenians are tough people, and they have survived a lot. And seeing how things have changed there gives me some hope, and I'm in precious need of hope these days. So that's why I made this video today. I'm going to add at the end of this video a few photos that I have from the 90s, including a few from the earthquake. I did not get a chance to go to that part of Armenia when I visited last year, but I have a feeling that those buildings have been demolished and rebuilt. And the silver lining is they can be rebuilt in the much more tasteful Armenian style rather than the crappy Soviet style. So that's about all I have to say. Hope you have a good Saturday. See you next video.